Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Passive House Accelerator's ninth Global Passive House Happy Hour of 2021, and episode big number 50. Wow, 50 already. Thank you for joining us. We've only got a few more shows until our 1-year anniversary. I am Prudence Ferreira, and I'm a senior member of the Carbon Neutral Design Group at BR Plus A Consulting Engineers and lead their Passive House team. And for those of you who may be new to our happy hour, we're a super inclusive gathering. We welcome everyone, no matter who you are. If you're interested in learning about building science, passive house, zero energy, zero carbon, electrification, retrofitting our built environment, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you're in the right place. So as we near the first anniversary of this weekly gathering, and I look back on how our lives have changed over the last year and how our community has grown, I think about friendship and loss and vulnerability. And some of us have lost loved ones directly or indirectly to COVID. But no matter what, we all have suffered loss, certainly loss of the lives that we knew, and maybe loss of work, definitely loss of human contact. And yet, what I feel is true, and maybe you do too, is that those who have suffered understand suffering and therefore extend their hand. And there's joy and healing in the act of giving, love, kindness, and support. And that's really what we're all doing here. We love our families, we love our communities, our planet. And so we come here to share ideas of how we can better support them and ourselves in a way that aligns with our values. Over the weekend, our community lost a dear friend, Sam Hagerman. He was a teacher, an innovator, a passive house pioneer, a mentor to so many, and definitely an instigator and a fellow mischief maker. He was a humble and brilliant guy. And he was one of those people that just burned so bright and felt life so deeply that it sometimes pushed him to some dark and lonely places. But from those places, he still extended his hand to help, always. So tonight, I'd like to open the show by inviting you all to unmute yourselves and join me in a toast. Here is to extending our hands out and helping each other, and may those rings of connection continue rippling after we're gone.
Cheers.
You're here.
Cheers.
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 Yeah.
Here.
And now I'd like to ask you all to mute yourselves and join me in just a little moment of silence to remember Sam and everyone that we've lost over this last almost year. The reality is that when we lose someone, we don't forget. We don't really move on or have closure, but rather we honor and we remember and we carry forward in our hearts those we have lost into our lives in a new way. And tonight we have with us Natalie Leonard joining from Nova Scotia to share her thoughts with us about carrying forward Passive House into the mainstream. But first, we're going to have a video from Zach that was from our show last night, some thoughts that he wanted to share with us also about Sam.
Thank you. It's to acknowledge Sam Hagerman, and I have some sad news for folks who knew Sam. Sam passed away this weekend, and Sam was a friend and a colleague, a mentor. He was my boss for 6 years when I was at Hammer in Hand, and it's a loss for me, of course, but a loss for the community and for the Passive House builders and practitioners who Sam and Sam's work have inspired over the last decade. So I'm going to just take a few moments. Please, I apologize for the time But I want to acknowledge him for all of us, and also I want to do this just because I know that he would smile to think that this community that he cares so much about are remembering him in this way and saying goodbye. So Sam, as I mentioned, I first met him at Hammer in Hand. Hammer in Hand about 10 years ago was one of the pioneers of passive house construction in the Pacific Northwest. And this is the job site of the Karuna House, which was one of the first single family houses in Oregon. And this image captures what Sam was all about. So he's here sharing the building science knowledge and the passive house science knowledge that he's learning with other builders and other practitioners and architects and engineers, and sharing this, what he called the unified field theory of construction. For him, passive house brought all this stuff together and made it cohesive and powerful and understandable. And this is the Karuna House. This is the finished product. It was the first passive house that I experienced. It was beautiful with this views of across wine country in Oregon, and I think it inspired a lot of people about what passive house could be. Sam was also the first president of the Passive House Alliance US. He's pictured here on the left, and he served on the board of Passive House Alliance US along with Graham Irwin, who's pictured at the right there. Graham was vice president, and this is a picture of in Innsbruck. You can see Mike Kernagis of FIAS there, and Zach from 10 years ago. We're at Innsbruck at the International Passive House Conference in this photo. And he was close with Betsy Pettit from Building Science Corporation, and of course, Katrine Klingenberg of FIAS, both as a supporter of their work and a beneficiary of their work and an advocate for passive house and building science. Sam built a team at Hammer in Hand that include people that are now lifelong friends and people I cherish in my life. So Skylar Swinford there on the left, and Dan, and he's a master of passive house consulting and modeling, and Dan Whitmore there on the right, who's a guru of passive house construction. And a lot of the images I'm sharing are from Dan and Skylar as we've been speaking with each other over the last 24 hours. So one of the adventures that Sam went on, and one of the many adventures of Sam's life, was to do passive house and high performance building consulting for the royal family in Bhutan. And he did this work with Dan Whitmore. And Dan has an anecdote based on this photo here that I wanted to share with everybody. Here's a fun pic of a silly moment in Bhutan. I was to his left. To the left of me was the Chief Justice of the Bhutanese Supreme Court. Adjoining tent held part of the royal family, and the next tent was one of the head lamas of the country. It was a wacky world which Sam loved and made sure his friends could enjoy with/because of him. And I want to just close with some words from Graham Irwin. And Graham says, Sam Hagerman was a great friend and a hero and a role model to me. His work in Passive House was technically and aesthetically excellent, but the way he worked was even more exemplary. He truly cared about what he was doing and for the people he worked with. He mentored and empowered his employees to become the consummate and competent professionals they are today, and dedicated his business and used his influence to make the world a better place. Rest in peace, my friend. We'll miss you terribly. Here's to Sam. Thanks, everybody. All right, so with that, we are going to, let's see, I need to stop YouTube. We're going to go into breakout rooms for a few minutes, and this is a chance to connect. So say hello to one another, and it's going to be short, so you'll have to be quick about it. But this is why we do these events is so that we can connect with one another.
So I'm very honored to introduce tonight or today, wherever you're at on the planet, Natalie Leonard. Natalie has been a part of the Passive House community pretty much since it started in North America. She's a founding partner at Passive Design Solutions, and her mission is to make sustainable high-performance homes affordable for everyone. She was the first certified Passive House consultant and Passive House builder in Canada, and she leads the Passive House Design Solutions team. She's got a depth of experience in creating cost-effective and beautiful homes, and she brings with her into her design practice an engineering background and hands-on design and construction experience. Speaking of she who builds. So today she's joining us to share her insights on how to get people in the mainstream new home construction market to build passive houses. Thanks for being with us, Natalie.
Thanks, Prudence. And thank you both for your kind words about Sam. I did not hear that he had passed. And I knew Sam, of course, through the early days in the community. And I would describe him as incredibly humble and kind and generous, on top of all his technical and teaching skills. And it's a sad day to hear that he's living in a different level of energy now. I hope he's well in that. So I'm going to turn on my share screen now. Hopefully that will come up here. As Prudence said, I started Passive House in 2009. I was in the second training, and with fear of being long-winded, I do feel it is a good story. I was actually at the Green Building Council conference in Boston, and I found Mike and Kat standing at their little Passive House booth at that conference, and I was talking to them and said, "Oh, maybe I'll come to that conference next year." And Mike said to me, "You should come to the training." And so I went back to my hotel in Boston and booked a flight to go to Chicago the next weekend. So I went back to Halifax, and I went down to Urbana the next weekend. So, and it was the second training that they had done in Passive House. So we started off as a design build firm, and over the years, as we've gotten busier with design, we've transitioned to working with other builders. And I've kind of lost count, but I know we've worked with more than 35 builders that there's first time building a passive house. So that's been an interesting process. The company's now owned by myself and Mike Anderson, who's an architecture graduate. And we're a little team of 10. We just added 3 people in the last couple of months. It's been extremely busy this year since the fall. And Liz is on with us tonight as one of our newest employees, part of the team. We have worked exclusively, I'm just trying to find a spot for this to get out of my way. There we go. We've worked exclusively on passive house projects over the last 12 years, and we've completed over 200 projects to date. I counted them up for something else, and we completed 53 projects last year. So a lot of work for our little team. We've certified 14 projects with FIAS, and over the last years provided the FIAS builder training across Canada. That's all gone online now, which is makes it a lot more accessible for folks. So I'll be doing some of that teaching with Dan Whitmar's group going forward. And one of the things that we talk about a lot, it's a constant kind of conversation between our group, is how do we get people in the mainstream new home construction market to build a passive house? And so this is just kind of my brain dump based on my own personal experience over the last 12 years. I know there's lots of ways to skin the cat, as the expression goes, but this is the direction that we've gone. So we kind of have identified kind of 2 separate problems to making this happen. So how do we get people with deep pockets, I call them the wealthy, the rich and famous sometimes, to care about saving energy and care for the planet. And the other demographic that we work a lot with is young people, and they care about saving energy and energy security and doing right by the planet, but they have limited budgets. And I call them the most people. So what are the barriers that we've heard over the last few years? And this will be familiar for most of you here. I don't want to give up anything. My steam shower, my hot tub, the list can go on. Will it look weird? Have no windows, be the passive house prison, etc. Will I have problems with new stuff, new equipment, different suppliers? Who can build it? Probably the second question we hear from clients is who can build it. The first one we hear is typically, can we afford it? And then the last one is probably the hardest to overcome is I've never heard of it. So those are the main barriers that we see that we have to get by to get buy-in into the mainstream. And the problem is kind of a little bit different in my mind. So what we've experienced is people that can afford to build new homes in general, energy bills really mean nothing to them. You know, the monthly cost of $500 or $600 a month spent on energy is a very small part of their family budget, and saving on their monthly energy costs really mean nothing to them. They often are pretty interested in bragging rights and are more interested in certifying. And their main motivation that we find is doing the right thing for the planet. So, and sure, they'll buy into the other comfort benefits of passive house, but we find the main motivator if someone is on the high budget is going to make a passive house, their motivation is to be responsible environmentally. We find that net zero is more sexy than passive house. It's sort of like the Tesla compared to the Toyota Corolla, which is a super fuel efficient car, but really not very sexy. And what we found with this segment of the market is it requires a lot of mission work. You gotta get out there and be promoting passive house and the benefits other than just cost. And that work is unpaid. So as many of us in small companies trying to eke out a living doing this work that we love, unpaid mission work can drain your resources. With the most people problem, typically they're already interested in passive house, but can they even afford a code built house? Can they build a new house, afford to build a new house at all? And we're seeing really, I'm sure everyone is seeing really huge increases in material costs with COVID. Lumber went up 300% last year here in Nova Scotia. The numbers have to make sense. And this is tricky because it varies across regions. So regional costs we find can drastically vary. How much a ductless mini split costs in Toronto is more than double what we pay for it here. And whether or not in Nova Scotia, for instance, we don't really need any cooling. So we don't need central HVAC systems, which really helps make our numbers work. Whereas in Toronto, the cooling loads are higher than the heating loads in a passive house. Good design can save a ton of costs. And we had one of our builders build one of our designs, and he was trying to get his mother-in-law to go ahead and do one of those. And she was like, I can get a free plan from the Home Hardware building supply. And she did that, and her roof trusses cost $21,000. And normally we would probably say, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 for that size house for roof trusses. So just being smart about design can help save some of that building cost and move that towards the upgrades towards passive house. We think using locally available materials and trades is critical to getting into the mainstream. I know that there's some awesome imported products, and now that we do have a 745 outlet in Canada, there's better access to those things. But most trying to specify new materials, it has been a barrier that we see resistance from the builders. And most of these, the most people problem also is they can't afford certification. They're not able to move to that. And with some of the rebates we have in Canada, certification costs the same as the number of solar panels you need to get to net zero. So it's a hard justification on certification. And most of these folks are already sold on the idea of passive house. They've done their research, they've digested a lot of information. So it's, for us, it's making this work for them financially. So this is just a very high level, what are our main cost drivers? Being smart about the site. If clients are out looking for a site, you know, is there shading and require clearing, or is there shading that's not controlled on the lot because it's a building, or trees on the neighbor's lot can have an impact on cost. You have clearing, but you also may have to use more strategies to improve the efficiency because you can't get any solar gains. Grade is a big one for us. We're usually building slab on grade, and if we have a lot of grade across the site, we can spend quite a significant amount on fill, often more than all the upgrades of passive house put together. There's the upfront costs of architectural fees, energy consulting fees, engineering for things like foundations bearing on foam insulation, etc., and certification fees. And then in construction, the big ones are upgraded assemblies, air sealing, upgraded doors and windows, and mechanical systems. So those are kind of our three areas that we're trying to address from a cost perspective. And one of the things that we decided to do about 5 years ago, because we noticed we had a lot of conversations with folks about passive house, and a hurdle for them was the upfront costs. And the reason for that, a big part of the reason for that was they couldn't roll it into their mortgage. So coming up with $20,000 or $50,000 to design a custom home just made it unachievable for them. So we made a commitment to design some ready-made passive house stock plans, and it was about 5 years ago that we made that decision. And so we made a commitment to energy model all the plans. They're designed for solar orientation, to use simple assemblies, to have them be designed for buildability, simple for a builder to pick up and execute, to use North American made materials and equipment, and helping reduce soft costs and providing a quicker timeline in when someone can get ready to start their construction. We were really fortunate in that there's an organization here in Canada, National Research Council, that funds research and has an interest in energy efficiency as part of their focus. So we got a grant from the National Research Council that allowed us to do a lot of costing, energy modeling, and WUFI moisture profiling to test the assemblies across all the climates. So that work, and it boiled us down to three ways to approach our assemblies. So the roof, we use stick-built roof trusses with blown-in cellulose. Our stock plans use a frost stem wall foundation with a slab on grade using EPS insulation. And then the walls, we settled on a double stud, a form of the double stud approach to the construction. And for us, the wall is kind of the holy grail. That the roof is pretty easy, the foundation's pretty easy, but there's a lot more factors that really influence our decision on how we're going to build a wall. And I'm going to run through these pretty quickly because I want to stay on time if I can. We wanted our walls to accept all siding types, so we needed a nailing-based sheathing on the outside. We wanted to be able to air seal from the inside. We live in a very, one of our profs described it as a freezing jungle, We have a long winter and we have a lot of moisture. So air sealing on the outside is really a challenge in our climate and many Canadian climates. We wanted a durable, continuous, simple air sealing details as part of the wall assembly. We wanted to use materials that were widely available from local suppliers. Go to your building supply place. We wanted a code-built structure so that we didn't have any engineering required. And we wanted to be able to easily vary the insulation levels so that we didn't have to redimension all the plans to make a thicker wall for Edmonton compared to the climate, say, in Vancouver. We wanted solid building science across all the heating dominated clients. And this was really interesting for us when we did WFI analysis of assemblies. A wall that is really good in Edmonton fails in St. John's, Newfoundland, and vice versa. So trying to find a balance where we didn't have to change how much inside, how much outside, to achieve good building science in the assembly was also important. And then of course, no thermal bridging in that. And also considering low global warming potential materials and less embodied energy materials. So it's a pretty long list, and the approach, and then we also throw in cost, which isn't on this list. Our approach to construction cost, our goal is to build passive house for the same cost as the code built house. And really what we're trying to do, we've right from the beginning, we started with this goal to use locally available materials, put them together in different ways to create a passive house, but have those be materials and equipment that the trades are already familiar with. We found that getting buy-in from the builders was greatly improved if we could do this. As soon as we started telling them we're importing things, they think callback. So here's a few examples of stock plans that we have built. This is pardon me, a little duplex that I built in Cape Breton for my parents who are 89 and 90 to move out of their home and have accessibility and be warm because they're always cold. This was a stock plan that we built and on spec and sold because we wanted to demonstrate that a passive house would be worth more in a market than a code built house. We built it on a new street where all the rest of the houses were code built. It was a little bit smaller, but we sold it for $30,000 more than the other houses on the street. This is a stock plan built in Ontario that's off grid, uses a big solar array and a little bit of propane. And then we've also done a number of custom homes. So this is a certified passive house that's also has enough solar now on the roof to be net zero. This was a project we took down to the foundation and then rebuilt in a very traditional neighborhood in the city of Halifax. This is a certified passive house also in Halifax. And this one of our newer projects, a beautiful site right on the ocean in the South Shore, stunning views, and a fairly expensive, fancy, as we would call fancy house. So that's it for me for presentation, and I am very looking forward to questions.
Excellent. Okay, well, the questions are queued up. So we're going to start off with Derek who's our weekly weekly individual from China. So we always get the China update from him. So thanks, Derek, for joining us, and you get to start off with questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. It's raining here, by the way, just so you're wondering. So, yeah, I'm very interested in promoting resilience for all the homes. I think the example of what happened in Texas last week, the last 2 weeks, is just really important. And my product is the DC microgrid inside for efficiency and lighting, etc. So you'll hear me talk a lot about that. But I'm usually pushing passive house because, and I was wondering in your promotion and sales to general builders, One of the things I didn't hear you mention was that survivability or resilience. Have you found that that's an interest to your audience, or they just are more interested in other topics?
Yeah, I definitely, we have a lot of power outages here. All our infrastructure is above ground on power poles, and we get ice storms and wind storms, and power poles go on fire on perfectly good, fine weather. So it is a concern for folks. So they do like the idea that a passive house will, in our climate, maintain above freezing, because frozen pipes and things are a concern. But it is addressed quite simply in code built with a generator. A lot of people install a fixed generator. It uses a ton of propane, but again, if they're not cost sensitive to those monthly costs, they think it's a suitable solution. We do a lot of net zero now, because there is a really good rebate from the province on solar panels. And more and more, we're adding a small amount of backup battery to, and estimating kind of what the client's tolerance is for how long they can be out of power, and what circuits they need running during power to survive through those storms.
The electrification of the whole world is also going to make a little bit more availability, but there have been problems with accessibility of propane, natural gas, etc. Have you seen issues like that, where even though they have the generators, they just can't get the gas or the fuel?
No, we haven't. Like, we had a storm maybe about almost 20 years ago, where the power was out for 4 days. And then but typically our power is out for maybe like 5 to 8 hours. So it's kind of very rare that we end up with a long outage. And I don't know if that'll change in the future with worse storms, but historically people seem to think if they can get by for a half a day, they're okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Harvey had a couple questions. Harvey, you had a quick one and a long one, so fire away.
Yeah, no, I think one was answered, how many plans you had made, and I think someone said 40. Is that correct?
I think there might be 44 on site now. We added 9 during COVID, when everything just sort of died for a few months. But yeah, I think there might be 44. I'm not sure.
That's fabulous. And my other question, I'm the guy who always asks on numbers, so I'm not going to ask about numbers today, because I think Hans wants to ask it. But do the plans lend themselves to become prefab versus being stick built? That's one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking. It was all about local trades and local suppliers, but we have some people on who do prefab, so I'm just curious if they lend themselves.
Yeah, we're now working with 3 or 4 different small prefab companies on our stock plans. In Nova Scotia, we haven't had any prefab. We're really rural, so transportation costs start to outweigh site costs. But in areas like Southern Ontario, we're working with a few prefab wall assembly builders, and almost all of our stock plans have some modifications. So we've added basements, we've changed wall types to match what. Like for instance, some of our builders in Ontario are natural builders, so they won't use any foam in their walls. So we do some adjustments to the assemblies specific to those clients. But yeah, and so rapid housing, which you're probably familiar with, Harvey, because I think you're in Toronto, but the federal government just released a schwack of money for rapid housing for underserved populations. And one of the things that they put in there is that prefab was a requirement to the project. So we have 2 projects that we're doing that are funded under rapid housing that will be prefab walls. And we're also doing a number of the stock plans that way in the future. They haven't been built. We haven't built any that way yet, but we're planning some now.
One other question. You had said that the plans originally, people were having trouble mortgaging out when they were $50,000. How much how much are the plans now? I know it's a
They're
cost
they're
question.
they're 6,000. They're 6,000, Harvey.
Oh, they're 6,000. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. That's a fabulous price. Thank you.
And so Natalie, just because you can't keep up with the chat, can you tell us the unit of measure of a schwack? People didn't understand that. I love that. And also to rabbit housing or rapid housing?
Rapid housing.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
we're just
yeah.
easy on that one. Just
Yeah,
because you
yeah.
know we've got.
Schwack is just like a lot, like a truckload.
Oh, I know, I love it. When our American fellows don't catch on to our lingo, I appreciate the banter that carries on. So
Yeah.
thanks, Natalie. All right, so keeping back to the list, we are over to Hans, who hopefully won't ask the cost question that Harvey usually asks, but decided to pass on to Hans. I'm going to just take away from Hans. But
I'm not asking that one.
good, go ahead, Hans.
Actually working with one of the builders right now that is building one here. But one of the questions was, how do you deal with orientation? Because you can't just, or you shouldn't just be dropping in the house anywhere in any orientation.
They all have a specific orientation. So it's south front, south side, or south back, and then mirroring the south sides. The tricky part is when you get a 45-degree off lot and not much room to turn. And then we usually end up doing an energy model and trying to balance kind of that southeast, southwest face. And we have learned that southwest is our real problem for overheating. So we may change the glazing type and try to prevent some of that overheating depending on orientation. But they are designed for specific orientations.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Right, and just because I was teasing people about being American or Canadian, for those that are coming to me saying Earthlings, if you're on this planet or you're planning to go to Mars, I didn't mean to disrespect you. I'm just having fun with all the group that's here today. So thanks, Hans, and over to Susan in Toronto as well.
Great, thank you. I have just a question about FIAS and PHI. So I get from your backstory, Natalie, that you went down to the US and you learned the FIAS model, I guess. But is there what's going on in the Maritimes in terms of, if you're seeing passive house, is there the two programs going or more FIAS?
There's a little bit of the and maybe there's more than I know of, but there is a few projects that have been built sort of following the German standard. When we started, FIAS was following the German standard, and our original certifications worked with those targets and metrics. It was interesting because we were one of the pilot projects for the first FIAS, standard. And we asked to be part of that because we had a affordable housing project that was a beautiful south-facing backyard lot. It was a duplex. It had been designed by Housing Nova Scotia. It was already just a cube. I mean, there wasn't a lot of advantages to have. And we could not reach the targets because we had a schoolyard in the back that was full of giant trees, and we had no solar gains. And the only way we could get that thing to be to reach and they wanted to certify. The only way we could reach the targets was make the passive house prison and get rid of the windows, and almost all of them. So because we have a long winter. So from my perspective, having worked with both metrics and both targets, the affordability of the FIAS targets for us has just been much more doable. And as we all know, when you get into those situations where you don't have any solar gains, there is a diminishing return on insulation. And you can start, as Prudence would know from working up in the Alaska, your diminishing return on thicker walls just has no payback. And so what we do now is we do sensitivity testing in the energy model, and we measure, and we're fairly good at estimating costs because we build, and we still build one or two projects usually ourselves every couple of years. We do an ROI on the strategy that we're modeling on the sensitivity, and If it's more than 7 years, it's cheaper for us to put on solar panels. That's the ROI on solar panels right now. Now we're always watching the comfort targets of peak loads, right? So you don't just build a crappy building envelope because solar's cheap, but that balance of diminishing returns and insulation in sites where you just can't get any solar has really led us to be firmly in the targets of FIAS.
Cool. Well, thank you for that, Natalie. Beautiful, beautiful projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, heading over to Calgary, Kevin in Cowtown.
Hey there, Natalie, that was great. Thanks very much. I really love the simplicity of some of your designs. Wonderful. But the question I had is, what's the winter design temperature in Nova Scotia? But I asked that thinking that you were only working there, and since then you've clarified that you've got clients all over the place, including frozen Calgary, Alberta. But
yeah, and I think our I think our heating degree days in Imperial is around 7,000. And I know when we work on projects in Edmonton, I think it's like about 14, but we've done projects in South Dakota, Inuvik, Fort St. John, Edmonton, so, and a real range of climates.
Yeah, okay, because Calgary is actually, we do better than Edmonton because we have Chinooks. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Maritimer, born and bred with my built-in homing device, but I lived in Calgary for 5 years.
Great, Kevin, thanks. All right, move along, Ingrid Green.
So really cool presentation. I didn't even know that people normally ask about the cost estimate. So I'm going to ask the cost estimate question. And how much do the houses that you worked on, or I guess you didn't work on them if you mostly have the plans available, but how much was the construction for that you're aware of for any of the houses?
Yeah, and it's the question that you get most often, and it's the question that's the hardest to answer. But I'll give you my reason why. So, and I'll give you a little bit of, I'll answer Hans' cost question and Harvey's really quickly. So in Nova Scotia, in a 2,000 square foot house, it costs us between $25,000 and $30,000 to upgrade to passive house. No certification costs, no front end costs, but actual construction upgrade costs. We can get a $10,000 rebate from the province, and we're eliminating a central heating system, which is cutting those costs down by 15 to 20,000, depending on what would be the baseline heating system for that project. So that's where we can build a passive house for the same cost as a code-built house in Nova Scotia. We don't need cooling. We have built houses for as low, that little duplex that I showed you the picture of, the little blue house with the steep roof. I built that myself 2 years ago for $135 a square foot. I shopped the hell out of finishing. It's a vinyl box. It's in a market where you can buy an old house for $64,000. I had to really, really crunch the cost to get a mortgage. And we've built houses for $450,000 a square foot. And what we tell our clients is,
I'm sorry, what? Wait. Sorry. Oh, well, I just went into shock for a second there. Did you say $450?
Yes.
Dollars per square feet?
Yes, and they both, the 135 a square foot and the 450 square foot, they both perform the same way. The difference is finishing. So,
So the $135 per square feet, about how many square feet was that?
It was about 1,860 feet.
Okay.
And the $450 a square foot was about 2,000 square feet. So, and I want to emphasize, they perform the same way. So you can spend $1 million on that house, or you can spend,
Okay, I appreciate it. That's awesome.
And one of the other, Mike, who can be a little bit, has a good sense of humor, but maybe a little on the harsh side when people say, what's the ROI of Passive House? He says, what's the ROI of your granite countertops? Because they cost about the same in Nova Scotia.
Best line in the, love it. Great, Natalie. All right, we're gonna hop over to Zach. I did try to give him a heads up. Zach, you ready?
I'm totally unprepared.
I know, I tried.
I'm in my, like,
Okay.
but I can, so give me.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
Give me a moment.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll go over to Devin. Devin, actually, sorry, before Devin goes on, maybe I'll ask my question. Sorry, Devin, I'm going to bump you just because I have it ready. Natalie, oh my goodness, and then I don't even have my own question ready. Just I'm so disorganized. So there you go, Zach. Oh yeah,
I'm ready. I'm ready now.
You beat me to it.
Sorry. A lot of people are reaching out about Sam, and so I was just responding to somebody about that, and he touched a lot of people. Everybody. Okay, so let me share my screen. And none of this happens without support from these people, these organizations on the sheet. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors: 475 High Performance Building Supply, Backstinkwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minotaur All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows. Our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, and our patron sponsors are BR+A Consulting Engineers, Brennan Insulation and Airtightness, Innotech Windows and Doors, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud.
All right, well, thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us and sharing your techniques and ideas. And we've got a lot more questions in the queue. So for those of you who are going to log off for the evening, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you come back again next week. And for those of you who are going to stay on, let's roll on into the after hour.